Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Map Making 101 for Company of Heroes 3. My name is John. I am one of the community managers on the team, and I hear you saying, but John, we finished making that map with Will. Who's controlling the cursor today? Who's our new instructor? Why, it's David. David, who are you? What do you do?
Hello, my name is David Milne. I'm one of the mission designers here who worked on Company of Heroes 3.
Amazing. And what missions might our players know you from in Co 3?
Oh, what did I work on? I worked on Anzio, Ortona, Pomigliano, Foggia, Tobruk was another one of mine. I think that's all. No, I did Steward Ace, or Saving Private Norton, I believe, is what the players know it as.
But in your heart, it's Steward Ace.
In my heart, it's Steward Ace because it was a mission I pitched just kind of as a reference joke to Tiger Ace. What if you had a mission where you played the weakest tank instead of the strongest one? And yeah, then that was a fun one. I liked that little mission.
It was fun. But we're here to have a different type of fun, David. We did this entire series with Will where he showed us how to create a map from start to finish. So what are you here to teach us today? What are we going to be covering?
So what we're going to be covering today is some of the basic scripting that players are going to be able to do in our editor, and specifically how to script using our prefab system. So prefabs are basically prepackaged SCAR functions. That's scripting at Relic, or SCAR. It's the scripting language we use. If you are, familiar with our editor at all, or have worked on, maps and modes in Company of Heroes 1 or 2, you're probably familiar with this. And basically what a prefab is it's, well, like I said, it's a prepackaged SCAR function. So instead of having to, say, write out a function in SCAR for spawning a unit or something like that, you can select the spawn squads action from a drop-down menu, and it already has a little section for you to indicate what squad you want to spawn and where you want to spawn it. This is a system that we built up sort of throughout production of Company of Heroes 3, just something that helped us sort of streamline the way that we built missions. You're gonna spawning units in particular, right, is something that you do a lot throughout every single mission, and so instead of having to write that out every single time, we can just select that action and it's already made for us. It's written the same way in every mission. It's not written differently per mission because we're all writing it in our own different ways and stuff. And so yeah, it just really helped us streamline. And basically throughout production, if we found, our general rule was, if we were basically creating the same functions over and over and over again, just package that up into an action. So by the time we get to the end of the project, we actually have a ton of conditions and actions and stuff that we can draw from, because that's, most of what we were using during production. But they're all sitting here in the editor, and players have access to them. Some players have actually already been using them. If you go in the workshop, or if you're hanging out in the Discord, in that map making Discord, you'll see that some people are creating little horde modes and some other stuff as well. So we thought, well, they're sitting here in editor. Why don't we kind of show everybody how to use them?
Okay, so just to clarify, because I'm very unfamiliar with this stuff. So if I've created a map, and we're kind of talking about prefabs that are mostly used for single player design, what can those prefabs do for my sort of workshop multiplayer or co-op focused map?
So, but one of the things that you're going to be using them most of the time is just to have, specific events happen, right? Like I said, you can spawn units, you could spawn abilities, right? Like you call in, or I was about to say orbital strikes, naval bombardments, effectively orbital strikes for our purposes, bombardments or airstrikes, we could script it so that when you capture this victory point here, you get an extra tank spawned for you, or it calls in artillery all around to just clear the area to add a level of danger to it or something, or we could even take an interactive zone and lock out a whole section of the map until 20 or 30 minutes into the game, and then we unlock a new section of the map, kind of a thing, right? So like there's lots of like I said, there are tons of actions, and so what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you where prefabs live, kind of a general overview of how to use them, and a few examples of the conditions and actions that you can use. But really, at the end of this, what I'm hoping is that players kind of jump in and start exploring, right? Like there's no way in a video like this that we could go over all of the possible, things that you could do with prefabs, but hopefully after this video you are you kind of have enough to go on to start exploring and figuring things out and experimenting on all the things that you could do.
Okay, so where do we get started then?
Well, the first thing we do is change Will's window layout because I use a different window layout. Sorry, Will. But yeah, the one of the things you're going to realize with prefabs here, this, by the way, is where prefabs live. If you go to the scenario, you're probably familiar with all of these folders here because that's what will have been going through with with making the map. And if you go a little further down, you'll see this prefabs thing. If you open that up, you'll see the name of your map, and that's where they live. And as you add more and more prefabs, this nested folder structure menu can get really long, basically. So I find having it in a vertical alignment helps a lot with that. Plus, you have the big render window in the center, and then you have your properties, which again, I'm pretty sure Will would have shown you some property usage and stuff on the right hand here. Yeah. Actually, I just want to stop for a second. This is a nice map.
It's pretty phenomenal.
Will's always so funny. He's just like, I'm just gonna quickly throw some together, just like to show how you make maps. It's gonna be a pretty basic map. Makes a beautiful map, just out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm excited for players to check it out in the workshop.
Yeah. Speaking of this beautiful map, let's blow it up. Let's blow up the map, I think. That's what we should use prefabs for. Let's give the people what they want. And I think what they want is explosions.
Always.
Anyway, so prefabs, like I said, they live over here. When you click on that, the way that you add a prefab is by right-clicking and hitting Add. That's going to pull up this menu here of the various prefabs that you can use. Now, most of these are not really going to be relevant for your use. They're, very kind of specific things that we're using for the single-player campaign. But one that will be useful for you is this one here called Pre-Roll Destruction. So I'm going to select that and hit OK. And you can see here we've now added a prefab. It's created a little box for you in the level. The box itself doesn't really do anything. You can just kind of put it to the side so it's out of the way. And here it is. So pre-roll destruction, what does that do? As soon as the level loads, it's going to drop a weapon of some kind on locations that you specify. So if I, like you see in this folder, bombing locations, I'm going to, again, right-click, add, and you've now added a bombing location. And so this little marker that I'm moving around here indicates where the weapon we select is going to land. So I'll select the weapon of choice here on the root prefab itself. And this can be anyone you want, basically. I think I'm going to choose the British naval bombardment. Because that just seems fun. And then I'm going to add a whole bunch more bombing locations. I'm doing that, by the way. I'm grabbing this and dragging it slightly, and you can see you get that little plus icon, and that just creates a duplicate. And so I'm going to just, I'm just going to move these all over the place. I'm going to put some close by so it's really obvious that we can see what's happening. I'm going to destroy these. Let's just destroy. Let's just hit the bridge maybe a bit. put a few of those on the bridge. And then what we're going to do is save. Very important. Save often. Control S. My hand is basically always hovering over Control S. And we'll hit up here. We'll go to build mod. We'll build that. And we'll head into Steam and we'll test it. This is going to be a lot of what you're doing when you're working with prefabs. Making a change, loading the game to check it, make a change, load the game to check it, make a change, load the game to check it. Unlike with the map work where you can really do a lot of work and then kind of do a bit of a play test, when it comes to prefabs, usually a best practice is to make incremental changes and test them incrementally as well. If you make a whole bunch of changes, you spend an hour or 2 hours doing a whole bunch of prefab work and then launch the game and it doesn't work, well, it could be anything you did within that hour or 2 hours that you were working,
Okay,
right?
I see.
So if you are making changes, you don't have to make like one change and test the one change, but you try to keep the amount of work that you're testing relatively small so that if it doesn't work, well, it was the last thing that I did probably.
Okay.
Rather than maybe it was something I did an hour and a half ago and I don't even really remember what I was doing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have added some pre-roll destruction, and we're just going to test it here. So we've got that going. And so what should happen, italicized should, is that we'll have a whole bunch of destruction appear on the map.
So does that sort of like play in order as you sort of like laid it out on the map, or like does it all happen at once?
It'll kind of all happen at once.
Okay. So essentially the map loads pristine, and the moment we load it, all that destruction is happening.
Yes. Or not.
Okay.
We're on the right side, right? Yes, we are. Okay, now we get to debug. What step did David miss? We've got the layer set tag that we're going to delete. So this is something that I believe is the exact reason why this is not working, and it was something I forgot, and it's something important to remember with pre-roll destruction. This is something that when we used in missions. So on the campaign map, if you've played the single player, before you get to a mission location, you can hit it with, a bombing run, or hit it with naval artillery, or, if you have the artillery company, again, you could hit a city or a mission location with artillery. That actually loads some of this pre-roll destruction. That's why we have it separate from the map itself, because you could play the map in a pristine state, or you could play it in a destroyed state. So this layer tag here is how we would differentiate that. We would track whether or not you've attacked it. We would tag that with the destroyed layer, and then we would load that. Because we would typically only be using pre-roll destruction for those purposes, we have it default to have the destroyed tag on. You're going to need to remove the destroyed tag because you guys don't have those sorts of layering. So we're going to save that. We're going to build burn. Now, if I had continued making prefabs and continued working on this, and we came back to that and it wasn't working, it would be harder for us to remember what we were doing. And that's why we test things incrementally.
All right.
Right? Like that.
Test frequently, test often. Got it.
Save frequently, test frequently.
So David, while we wait for this to load in again, I'm curious if there are any sort of common pitfalls or common mistakes that you or a new person exploring this might encounter as you're sort of setting up your first prefabs.
The most common ones are kind of the ones that I just, I just sort of showed. You just missed one toggle or one input or one thing like that, right? When we get into one of the other prefabs, you're going to see there are a few things that you'll need to toggle on and off to make it work, and they are just little checkboxes. And if you forget to hit the checkbox, you'll Oh, I can see debris flying already. So yeah, a bunch of those turrets just hit. Man, we could have added way more.
Way more, David. Come
Way
on.
more. Look at that. I think that there's
What's
some.
going on with that bridge? Oh, okay.
Okay, we could have added way more pre-roll destruction. All right,
But at least it worked this time.
but it worked.
Yeah.
Okay, let's add way more. Let's add way more in different ways. So we'll quit out here, and we'll go back to here. So for starters, yeah, we could have added way more pre-roll destruction. But we'll move on to something else, I think. We'll find a new way to add destruction because players
good.
now that you know, yeah, you can go nuts with all of this stuff and really just lay into the map you've just created.
Okay.
So we're going to collapse that for now, and we're going to go back to the top here, and we're going to add a new thing. And what we're going to add is the next prefab, which is called the Playbill. This is going to be your bread and butter. This is, 99.9% of the time we're in missions, this is what we're using. We are using the Playbill prefab. And the reason that we are using it, let's move this out of the way, is because when you expand it here, you see your playbills, you can add, and you will have conditions, and you will have actions. And that is, that's how you're going to make everything work, right? You have your conditions. So when something happens, do the action. That is basically the makeup of this. And
Okay,
so
if then.
if these are true, do these sets of actions, right? And you
Okay.
can have, just like with everything, you're right clicking to add. So I'll say add a condition. And we have this whole big list of conditions here. And if I want to add an action, we have an even bigger list of actions. And so these are the things I was talking about before. So for instance, the ubiquitous spawn squads action.
Right.
That's how we would, deal with that. Retreat, right? That's one that if you grab a unit, you can force it to retreat. Adding abilities. I don't know. Where's another one? Attack move. Again, this is one that you would use for telling units what to do, right? Or just attack. Applying a modifier. You can grab any unit or entity and you can modify its health or its received accuracy or its damage or any number of things here. And so there's just tons of these. Like I said, we can't go through all of them, but there's a lot here for you to explore. But the first thing that we're going to do is the thing that probably a lot of you are going to do, which is spawn squads. So you see I've selected that and immediately it's given us a whole bunch of options. So one of these options is you can set what player it is being spawned for. You can give it an upgrade, the squad PBG. This is where you would set what you want to spawn. And so let's just go with the classic spawn a rifleman. And let's spawn that rifleman with a BAR, right? So now at this point here that I've established, we will be spawning a rifleman with a bar. If you expand this here, you'll see that there's a start position and a destination position. So I can select that start position. The unit will spawn at the start position, and it will walk to the destination position. Simple as that.
Yeah, I gotcha.
If you want, I'm going to give ourselves more room here. If you want, you can have it use an attack move. So it will attack move from your start position to your end position rather than just walking there. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So spawning hidden in the fog of war. It will pick a point along these two, and if a player is standing here, it will spawn as close to the destination as it can while still in the fog of war, basically. That's a little one we use in the in the single player a lot. Spawn AI locked. When you're doing skirmishes, you'll have, of course, your skirmish AI that you're loading into the game. If you spawn it AI locked, the skirmish AI will not be able to use it.
Okay.
It will only do what you tell it to do.
Okay.
So that's a pretty important one. And then, of course, you can spawn it with the veterancy. You can choose the number of entities in the squad. So 0 is just the full squad, but I could spawn this rifleman with only 3 guys in it if I wanted as well.
Okay.
A lot of that is like very, it can't be nothing, it has to be 0. So like that was just a lot of very detailed information on spawning squads, but you can see like when you pull these down, it gives you these different sets of abilities. And so these are, like I said, wait is a very simple action where you just tell something to wait for a number of seconds and that sort of thing. So like you can see how like having to write all of this out in Scar could take a minute, but with this you just spawn squads, you have your options, you go through and select what options you want, and it's ready to go. So I'm going to not have a condition for now. And in this playbill, this is going to be one of the pitfalls I talked about. And everybody, listen and watch what I do right here. You select the root playbill and you click immediate.
Okay.
If you don't click that, it won't start. We don't have that on by default because there is also a prefab action that you can use to call other prefabs. So you can use a prefab to start a prefab. And so this means instead of using a prefab to start a prefab, as soon as the scenario starts, it immediately starts as well.
Okay.
You don't have to wait for it at all. And so I'm going to, just for the sake of clarity, I'm going to name this. So we're going to name this spawn squads, and I'm going to call this action spawn rifle. Just so that we can kind of keep track of what we're doing here, because as you get more and more and more prefabs, you're really going to want to make sure that you're being clear about your titles so that you can actually see what's going on here.
I can see how this can get pretty complicated pretty quickly.
It can get very complicated. We're going to keep it simple for today, and I'm going to show you how to use prefabs, and then we'll see where we go from there. And so what we've done is, if we start here, should spawn a player 1 rifleman squad. So let's save that. Let's build the mod. So we'll get this skirmish set up here. Another important thing, as well as like fixed locations, just so that if you're assigning a certain player to have things spawned for them, you're going to want fixed locations. And also these, you need to have it set to annihilation for your prefabs.
Okay.
So you're going to be kind of creating like custom setups with this a little bit.
So will prefabs not work with victory point game modes?
Yeah, they're not a fan of the victory point mode. Keep in mind, and like this is something that it's important to keep in mind with this, is that this was a system built for single player mission creation. And they're in the editor. So I want people to know how to use them, but there are some caveats to how you can use them.
Gotcha.
This is something that is kind of like, when you're seeing people creating like the horde modes in the workshop and stuff, they're kind of hacking it together a little bit to create really cool stuff. For sure. But there are limitations on how you can use this simply because of what it was built for, which is single player mission content. But you can still use it in some cases, and so we're going to show you how. So yeah, we have the purple destruction happening here, and we got a rifleman spawning in with a BAR.
Perfect. It worked the first time, David, and we definitely didn't have to cut a couple times.
It worked the first time, and we definitely didn't sit here debugging this for a minute too before we remembered that you can't use victory point. So yes, it worked perfectly. Nobody pay attention to timestamps. They won't see timestamps. Anyway, so there we go. We've got pre-roll destruction, and we've got a unit spawning. What else can we do with this? Let's add in a condition. But more importantly, let's add another playbill. So again, within spawn squads, you have a playbill here where I'm going to call first spawn, I guess, where we're spawning a rifleman with no condition. As soon as the mission starts, spawn a rifleman. For the second, sorry, I don't have my glasses on. I probably should have my glasses on. Spawn. We're going to, because I dragged on this one to basically duplicate it, which duplicates as well all of the actions inside, which is going to be useful if you're kind of like doubling up on stuff. So if I want to spawn a whole bunch of riflemen and then create another prefab where I spawn a whole bunch of riflemen, you can kind of drag to duplicate stuff. That's
so like you could theoretically do that if you, for example, wanted to spawn like similar unit compositions for different players, right?
Yep. You can even up here, I could have spawn squads A, and then just boop, duplicate the whole thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
And have spawn squads B, and maybe I spawn grenadiers in this one, right?
Okay,
So like there's like once you create sort of one setup of conditions and actions and stuff, you can always duplicate that work to help speed things along.
Okay, awesome.
But for the sake of simplicity and clarity here, we're going to kind of delete some of that stuff. And the second one we're going to spawn, we're not going to spawn a rifleman just to help us kind of differentiate. Let's spawn some commandos. I'll just get rid of that. We'll spawn them along the road. They'll come up the road, I guess. But we'll add a condition to this second spawn. And the condition we'll add will be another probably very commonly used one, unit at location. This is just basically checking if specified player, almost always going to want to do player one in these cases, player one has less than or equal or greater than or equal the indicated number. So if I want to say, and let's go over here. Here's some other stuff here. Most of it you can ignore except for the position, because this is the location that you are going to be specifying. And so we'll move this over here to this intersection. And then what we'll do is we'll open this up and add a radius to this proximity circle component. We'll do 15 meters. This is all in, well, game meters, I guess. And we'll kind of line this up so that as soon as the player kind of crosses this hedge barrier here, what should happen is, oh, wait, I need to change this. So unit at location is not equal to 0. Okay. If the player 1 has any unit within this circle, it will spawn, again, for clarity and good naming conventions, it will spawn the SSF. And I'll even actually name this, if there is not 0 player 1 units in that circle, spawn these SSF commandos.
Right. So I get a unit there, commando spawn.
And what we're going to do, we're going to spawn this rifleman. I'm going to take this rifleman into this intersection. By taking the rifleman into this intersection, it will spawn an SSF commando. Okay. So we will build this mod. You're going to get real used to this loading screen. And that's what happens when you're working with prefabs. Now, I am really being granular here, right? Like you could probably have done some of the things that we've done all in one go and tested it, and it would be reasonable for you to remember what you had done. I'm kind of purposefully doing this step by step so that we can see things here. Mm-hmm. Single player, skirmish.
And when we're testing prefabs, it has to be through the skirmish menu, right? Like we can't necessarily do this through custom game.
So you could do this through a custom game. It's a little quicker to do it through the skirmish. Okay. And we're not setting up a public game and I'd have to toggle the thing to be private and
gotcha.
So it makes sense to do it with this skirmish. So roll destruction goes off. Rifleman is spawned. I'm going to take this rifleman. I'm going to put it in the intersection. And when they cross this, they should, italicized should, spawn an SSF commando.
And the moment of truth.
There they are.
There they are.
We've spawned an SSF commando. So you can start to see how we have these very basic actions, but you can start layering and layering and layering these conditions and these actions to create logic for certain things to happen. Now, unit at location is a common one to use, like I said, but another one that we could use, another condition we have is player owner. So we could have it so that when we capture this, it does the exact same thing. And in fact, I think that's what we should do. Because now we're going to start talking about Sgroups and Egroups. What we're going to do is we're going to give these things names. Oh, I expanded some of these splines that I don't want. Here we go. So, player 1 is at location. Instead of doing a unit at location, let's do a player owner. Now, the player owner has this target type here. It has the S group. And if you look at this spawn rifleman action, it also has an S group. This is a name that you can give to things, to units in your game to basically be able to reference them. So if I wanted to say SG underscore, that's the naming convention you use, SG underscore rifle 1, let's call it that. And then I wanted to call these SSF, SG underscore SSF 1. These now are named. I can now, with specific actions, reference those riflemen. So, for example, player 1 at location, or sorry, I'll actually go back to unit at location. I can filter by S group. So I can say SG rifle 1. That means that I'm looking for, again, as long as the player has a unit in here, but only if it's this rifleman that I have named rifleman 1.
Okay.
So you can filter things in and out based on the names that you give them. We're going to use that right now. I'm going to change this condition to player owner, and I'm going to change this to E group. E group is how you name entities instead of squads. So that E group folder right now is empty. So I'm going to select this object, and you can do this with pretty much any object. You can do this with buildings, you can do this with territory points, and I'm going to give it a group name, EG for E group, and I'll just call it strategic point because we're just doing this as an example. It is now named strategic point. So in my player owner, I can say if the condition, I'm going to collapse that again, if the condition that player 1 owns the E group strategic point, and with E groups, once you name them, they appear in this drop-down list.
Okay.
So if player 1 is the owner of the strategic point, spawn the squads. And so we're going to do that. Did that save? That did save. And we'll build.
Oh, one thing I noticed, David, is when you were sort of spawning new, or maybe calling new like playable actions, you were having to, at like the element itself, you're having to pull it up through the map to like level it out.
Yes.
And I noticed Will had to do that as well with a few elements. So does that mean like everything kind of spawns?
Everything spawns at 0, 0, 0,
Okay.
basically. Well, actually, I think it spawns that at the center of your screen, but the height is 0. And because the ground plane of any map is very rarely 0, right? I'm sure Will went over this, but you actually lift up your ground plane so that you can go down for things like rivers and stuff. The ground plane is rarely, if ever, actually at
Okay. Fair enough.
0, 0, 0, which means those markers always stand. And you don't have to lift them up to the ground plane. I do it just just cause I want it to look nice and I don't want lines everywhere when I'm working. Right now there's not a lot of prefabs, but if you saw one of the sorry, I'm talking over this, but we're going to capture this point, and when we capture this point and it's completely ours, we should spawn an SSF commando. When you have like one of our major missions with all of the prefabs and stuff, ta-da, one of the prefab or all of the prefabs that are required for them, the amount of just lines and markers and circles on the screen for radiuses gets a lot.
Okay.
So you do whatever you can as you're working to keep a clean workspace.
Okay.
And part of that is lifting up your markers to the ground plane. And I didn't even notice I did that. I just do it instinctively now. Okay. So there you can see, like, we're getting in some kind of basic logic here, right? We're spawning units, capturing points allows us to do other actions as well. So yeah, what should we do next? I'm gonna hit Alt F4 and then I'm gonna go back to the editor is what I'm gonna do next. One of the things that Will probably talk to you about, actually I know he talked to you about it, was interactive zones. And so he was using the interactive zone to create a soft map edge. And if you take your little eyedropper tool here and you select that, you can see it's, wait, did I select that? I did, yes. That's zone 1, that's zone 0. And there are, however, a lot of numbers you can give it. You could, if we wanted to, create a target of 2, and we could paint a new interactive area, let's say around the city. And I'll just very quickly do that, and then, oh wait, 2, and then fill that in. There we go. So I've created this interactive zone around the city here, because maybe we don't feel like going into the city until, I don't know, until we've captured a bunch of the points out here or something like that. So what we can do, one of the actions that we have access to, I'll just save this quickly. Let's do another one. Second spawn, actually, sorry, let's not. We're doing this live. We're going to not only have when player 1 takes over this, player 1. We're going to rename that because that's actually what's happening here now. We're going to spawn an SSF, and because you can have multiple conditions and multiple actions in one of these things, we're going to set stage. And so that is, I'm naming it pretty much exactly what it is. Am I crazy? There it is. Set interaction stage. This is a pretty simple action. It just has one field. Set it to the interaction stage you want. I'm going to set it to interaction stage 2 because that is what I set to be this interaction stage. And so what's going to happen is, let's build this. What should, italicized should, happen is that when you, we'll spawn this, we'll capture this point. By capturing this point, we'll spawn an SSF squad, and this area will be unlocked to us.
Okay, so
because it will start locked.
All right, yeah, that was going to be my next question. So setting the interactive stage means it will unlock it, and until then, it is locked because we have painted it in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so reroll instruction happens. Spawning rifleman. The first thing I'm going to do is check this out, and you can see I can't go here.
Okay.
The map edge
it's already pretty clear that
is now like it's all blocked off. And so this, and you can even see on the minimap, like it's not showing any of the territory in that zone. Like this area is totally blocked off. And so we're going to be playing here. This is where the game is going to happen, out here on this kind of floodplain, this river plain. But if we capture this. I keep instinctively trying to teleport my units as if this is a dev build. It's not.
But yeah, this is already getting my mind racing about sort of the possibilities that for what we could do in a custom map like this. Like, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it feels like you could do very cool objective-based maps for players.
You could, yeah. I mean, certainly in terms of like lighter objectives, like have everybody does something on the map and it unlocks, a new area or something like that, right? You can, as long as you're using, AI players on the other side, instead of just relying on what they build as a skirmish AI, you could have them spawning units, right? Like when we unlocked this, we could just have a bunch of units already here waiting to fight you. Like you have to fight your way into this city now that it's been unlocked, and you can like the actions and the conditions themselves are pretty basic, pretty straightforward, but it's the layering of those actions on top of each other that you can really create some complexity here. So yeah, that's you can spawn squads, we can destroy things, we have conditions for unit at location for capturing certain things. We've gone over, let's see, what else have we gone over? We've gone over naming stuff. Like the reason that we know it's this point that can be captured is because we gave it that E-group name. And that allowed us to unlock a new area of the map. What we're gonna do is we're gonna blow up this town. And I think we're gonna blow up this town with, I think the bombing run is a good one. The American strategic bombing run. And so we will do that in a bit of a new way. What we're gonna do is we're gonna add another playbill. So this is now a separate playbill. We're gonna call this one the appropriately named bombing run. And so what we're going to do, we add our labels to this, and the conditions we'll use for this one is we'll use two of them. I'll kind of show that you can have multiple conditions. So one of the things we're going to do, we'll name this e.g. town fuel. Seems like an appropriate name. And then we'll name this one, e.g. town, town munition, and we'll save that very quickly. Okay, these two now have E-group names. So I want the player owner, let's switch that to E-group. I want the player 1 to own town fuel and town munition.
Before we get further, is there a way to set that condition for all players? No.
I mean, what we would do is this: I would say, town fuel can be owned by player 1 or player 2. Or player 3.
I see. Okay.
And here's how you would actually, let's do that. So player 1, player 2, wait, these aren't the same. Town munition. There we go. So if player 1, player 2, player 3 own the town munition, it'll go. But here's actually a really important thing. When you click on this second Playbills thing, the Boolean. This is the Boolean for your conditions.
Okay.
This is currently impossible because the Boolean says all. It is not possible for player 1, player 2, and player 3 to all own that point. So what I would switch it to is any one. Okay. If any one of these conditions is true, then the actions will happen.
Okay.
And that's another layer you can get into when it comes to your conditions, is you can set up multiple conditions, but have only some of them have to be true in order for the actions to go forward. You can also invert it. You can say none.
Right.
These things are all currently true, if it was possible for these all to currently be true. And when it is no longer true, then do one of these things.
Okay.
So, yeah, in this case, we will switch it to all because we're gonna have it so that the player, we're doing this from player one's perspective, so we'll do that. But that is how you would do that. You would basically just have a condition for each player and have it so that only one of them needs to be true in order for the actions to be permitted.
I see. Okay. Sorry, I'm overcomplicating things.
No, you're not. That's it. I wanted an excuse to talk about Boolean, and there it is. So, as long as the munition is owned by player one and the fuel is owned by player one, and again, for the sake of clarity, player one owns fuel, and then not player 12. What am I doing? Player one owns the munitions. Then, as long as both of those things are true, and heck it, let's also say that they have to have a unit. Unit at location. And we'll take that, and we'll say, and also, you have to have a unit there, this little courtyard thing. Move it up for sanity, and we'll turn that radius to be 15, so you can see the radius here is 15 meters, and we'll say that it has to be greater than 1. So you have to have 2, 2 or more things there.
Okay.
In order to do that, and
I kind of like this. It's got the evil dungeon master in me kind of spinning with ideas of like, oh, you could set up really cool like booby traps with these types of actions and
you
conditions, right?
absolutely could, and that's sort of what we're about to do. So the thing we're going to do here is we're going to do we'll do usability, and so we'll do the caster type. We'll set to player. We'll actually set it to player 2 just for funsies because we can. And we'll do a bunch of things here. First, we're going to ignore the ability cooldown. We're going to ignore fog of war, and we're going to skip the cost because we just want this to happen, right? We're going to ignore, any conventions of resource gathering or cooldowns or stuff. We're going to skip the cost, ignore the cooldown, ignore fog of war. This is just going to happen. We're going to change the target type to position. But of course, you could have the target type be a bunch of things. Note that S group and E group are both options here. So you could have the target be, actually just for fun, you could have it be, the SSF squad that we spawned in. That will be the target, right?
Okay.
Or you could have it as the position. The position is almost always going to be kind of like the classic go-to, right? Because you want it to land in a certain location. But you could always just find a squad, feed the squad name into that, and it'll use that as a target. So what we're going to do is this, and we're going to, kind of set the player up a little bit because they have to be in this location in the first place to have this go off. And then of course we have to actually choose the ability. So we'll go to the American battle groups, airborne, I believe, and then it'll be the carpet bomb. There it is. And so call carpet. Bam. I don't know why I'm like this. I know I'm being recorded, so I'm just typing so terribly. Okay. It's also worth noting, actually, with that usability thing, I set the player to be the caster. That's because I was using a battle group ability. You could also give an S group, and if I gave it the rifleman, then the usability, I could use the rifleman's grenade ability is the thing that I call, right? So you can give it specific units as well and call their abilities. In this case, we're just calling a bombing run, so it just needs to be a player. But
Okay. So just to clarify, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the player 1 to capture those 2 points,
yes,
then move
more than one unit.
more than one unit to that specific location.
Yes.
And then it should call the carpet bombing run.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see if it works. Let's see if it all works.
Reroll destruction. And then we've got this guy, and we've got these guys. So we'll call this.
Oh, that's right. I forgot we already locked the territory as well.
Yeah, the territory is locked, so we have to unlock the territory first before we go there.
Point out. We're moving to secure a position.
So David, when you're using playbills and things like this and prefabs and you're designing a mission,
You love marching. You know it.
I can't even fathom like how many prefabs and how many like different actions and conditions you might have
Hundreds.
for that. Yeah, start to finish. Maybe
At
hundreds, right?
least dozens. Depends on the size of the mission. But yeah, it's a lot. I mean, there are some missions that you can
Let's move out.
you can get away with keeping it a little bit more simple, and certainly
Come on, man. Let's go.
you're always trying to be efficient. Like the first pass you do when you're going to, if you guys start playing around with prefabs, you are going to make things inefficiently because you're trying stuff out and you're moving stuff around, and this action, maybe it should actually go over here, or actually I want to split this off into its own prefab so it has its own conditions and that kind of stuff. And so your first pass on something is almost always going to be messy and have too many actions to do things. A good practice and something that we do internally is once we feel like we've got a good handle on what we want to have accomplished here, we'll go back through and we'll kind of refactor it. Can I consolidate these 2 prefabs into one? Or, am I using too many actions to do one thing? And that's, that's just kind of a part of that development process. So there's now 3 units in here, and I've got these 2 things. Oh, excuse me, sirs. I still own that though, and the bombing run didn't happen.
So did it need to be 2 and not 3, or was there something else?
It was. So let's explore. I actually know the answer, and I realized it as soon as we started this mission what the problem is. But let's make it an exercise, John. Okay, so when earlier in the video, John, you talked about possible pitfalls, and I said the most common pitfall is you forget to launch your playbill
Immediate.
because you didn't tick immediate.
Gotcha.
I forgot to tick immediate. That's exactly what happened. But instead of doing that, let's untick immediate and let's make it a part of this other prefab. So once these happens, I've added another action to this second spawn thing. I'm going to collapse these. So bombing run is sitting here. It is not going to start immediately and currently has no other way to start. So it's just, even though it's built, nothing here happened because it hasn't been called yet. So I'm going to add another action. And I'm going to call it launch bombing run. And I'm going to use the action launch prefab or playbill. And when you look at this drop-down menu, it will have a list of all your playbills. These drop-down lists are part of the reason why it's really important that you name things in a reasonable way, because you're going to be doing this when you start to get into the more complex stuff, you're going to be launching prefabs and playbills from each other a lot. And so this is now going to launch bombing run. So the bombing run is not going to start immediately. What's going to happen is spawn squads is going to start immediately. We're going to spawn a rifleman. Then it will move on to, and all of these play just top to bottom. So this is the logic of it. we're going to spawn a rifleman because this is starting immediately. Then it's going to sit here on this until this condition becomes true. Once that condition becomes true, it will go through the actions of spawning this, setting the interactive stage, and then it will launch bombing run. Bombing run will go through and it will sit on these conditions until these conditions have been met, and then it will launch the carpet bombing run.
Right. So basically, if you have an issue anywhere in this tree,
You go up through the tree. And that's sometimes, I was saying, if we had made all of this at once and then tested it,
right.
any one of these points could be, the issue, and we'd have to go back through it. So testing things incrementally, that's where that kind of becomes important. So here we go. Having the prefabs be separate as well as helps when you have, like, you're waiting for different conditions to be met, right? Like, so we could have actually launched that bombing run at the beginning, right? Because it's going to sit there and wait for those to be true, regardless of what happens. But sometimes, just for the sake of clarity, for the sake of sanity in some points, you don't want everything just sitting there waiting to run all at once from the very beginning. If you don't need it to be sitting there waiting, then just wait to launch it later, usually. Okay. If the mission crashes or has an issue or something at the very beginning, but you've started all of your prefabs at the very beginning, then it could be any of them. Whereas if you're kind of like chaining them together and not launching something until you need it to be actually active, then you can kind of rule things out, depending on where you are, at what stage you're at. Okay, so now we're going to capture this.
We gotta get to that point. Let's go.
I feel like it's going to work this time, David. I've got a good feeling.
I got a pretty good feeling.
So David, once we show off, these playbills firing in the correct manner this time, is there anything else that you wanted to cover off for this first lesson?
I mean, that's a tough question because there's so many things we could cover, There's really so much you could do with these, and I mean, anybody who's kind of been looking at the drop-down menu for the actions, anytime I pull that up, can see there are tons of actions, and lots of conditions, and of course, once you start layering multiple conditions on top of each other, you can create some really specific scenarios. I think for now, once we see that this is actually working correctly, what we can do is maybe just kind of go over what we've learned a little bit, and I'll talk maybe point out a couple more pitfalls and stuff. And then we'll leave it for now. My hope is that this inspires people to explore, go through that folder, start calling, actions, and just see what they do. A lot of them are honestly pretty straightforward. There it is.
Instantly.
Yeah. So, player 2's getting us. I fell into the trap. There's a lot you can do, and if you just go into that and start exploring and seeing what you can accomplish and layering these actions on top of each other, I mean, that's what I've seen some of the people in the workshop do, right? Those comp stomp maps, right? The comp stomps 1, 2, and 3. I feel like every one that gets released is like a little bit more complex and has like a little bit more going on in it, So, just try out what you saw here. Get some squad spawning, right? Play an annihilation game where you're adding more enemy units to hang around this area. I'm thinking about Command and Conquer always has those unaligned factional units sometimes that hang around the map, and so yes, you Team Blue is fighting Team Red here, but there's enemies here that you got to chew your way through before you can even capture this point, kind of thing, right? Like those kinds of things. Make this something that people got to fight over. that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, this is a relatively, I say relatively simple. There's still a lot of conditions and actions here, but a relatively simple example of how you can use prefabs to cause certain events to happen in game. And the more and the more and the more you add, the more complex you'll be able to make it. So, I'm looking, what else could we add here? There's going to be one here that you probably want. It's a condition. Group count is a really useful one. Did I just click on an action again? I did. There we go. Group count is a really useful one. It takes one of those groups and just counts how many units are in it. And so you can have an action that is called, for instance, fill S group. And so what it'll do is it'll grab an area, fill an S group with any units it finds in there, and then you can base a condition based on how many units are in that group, right? For the S group and stuff. Or if you have enemy units that you're spawning, say we added four player 2 squads here, so 4 enemy squads here, and we added them to, they all have the same S group name of S group enemy squad. Mm-hmm. And then we said it's going to call in the bombing run when that S group is empty, right? You've killed all 4 squads, so the group count for that S group is equal to 0. Then we call in a bombing run, right?
Like you
can do things like that once you start remembering to like name your E groups and name your S groups. That's kind of how you're able to reference these things specifically, or even say, like I said, you could give a building an E group name, and so you could say, is there a unit garrisoned in this building? Explode it, right? To kind of set up a trap in some way, right? And have different things happen, or even make this kind of a thing that players are fighting over. Like once you've kind of put garrisoned units into this central area and you've kind of got control of it, or maybe even once you've controlled all 4 of these squads, you spawn in a combat group. Like that's the bonus you get for controlling that section of the map or something, right?
Or the enemy like counterattack.
Exactly, right? And so there's once you start digging into this, there's a lot of stuff that you could probably do. So that's my, I guess for anybody who's actually interested in it, that's my homework is just go and experiment with this stuff. Start calling some actions, add fun little events to your skirmishes, and kind of let your imagination go. There's a lot that you can accomplish here. And always remember to click the immediate button if you want it to actually launch. Or of course use the that was an extra thing I added. Use the launch prefab or playbill. That's the other classic one.
Right.
And then I guess the last little one I'll show you that players will probably want to know, of course, is the wait command, which is used all the time. It's very simple, and it just means everything runs top to bottom, spawn the squad, set the interactive stage, wait 30 seconds, then launch the bombing run.
Oh, okay.
That's all that does, right?
Okay.
If things are kind of timed out weird, or you want something to be delayed or whatever, you can always just wait for an amount of seconds.
Okay, so if you need a little pause in between some of the actions,
that's literally all it is. Yep.
Okay,
and that's a pretty straightforward one. So, yeah, that's I feel like that was pretty informationally dense, and so I kind of I could go on, but I feel like I don't know. I feel like I don't want to overwhelm people too much, and this can be overwhelming. So,
and I think we're gonna have to call this Advanced Map Making 101, David. I appreciate you walking us through this. I'm really excited for players to kind of sink their teeth into this and to sort of see what they can come up with. So, folks, as always, we're going to have links to our Modding Knowledge Center along with the workshop link for this map and everything else, including the Discord map making channel, which you can find on the official Discord and chat with other folks. I know, David, you like to chime in there every now and then and help people out. So thanks for joining us, folks. David, can you maybe tease what you want to look at next time?
Well, next time I would like to show off some things that are a little bit more complex. I want to walk through just a very simple game mode. You and I actually played it the other day. I was kind of challenging myself to see, like, can I make a game mode in like an hour using only prefabs? And I made a very simple little kind of sniper fight mode, and I'll go through how I accomplished that. And then I also want to go, and this is the tease, I guess. But I want to start talking about another prefab. So we went over pre-roll destruction. We went over playbills. I want to talk at some point about mission objectives.
Ooh.
Because we can add in objectives.
Amazing. Okay, I'm excited. Don't say anymore. We'll save
Make
it
your
for next time.
own little missions.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us today, folks. And thank you, David. I guess we will see you in the next one.
Yeah, thanks. This is fun.